So I was in a German government office yesterday, which, by the way, I don't recommend, not fun. I was there sitting with this civil servant sitting in front of me, working through some stuff, taking ages because Germany is very behind technologically. And you usually have to bring lots of paper, signed, stamped, and all of this kind of stuff. And it just takes ages. But anyway, I was speaking German to the civil servant, and basically in German, you have two forms of address. You have the informal du, and then the formal sie, which is actually technically also the third person plural used to address a group of people indirectly. So like they in English, but it's also used as a polite form of address to one person or a group of people in formal settings. And, you know, the same idea obviously exists in French, tu being the informal form of address for one person, and vous, the form of address for a group of people, but also as a polite way of addressing an individual person. And then in Spanish, tú is the informal form of address for a singular person, and vosotros is the informal form of address for a group of people. And then usted is the formal form of address for a singular person, and ustedes is the formal form of address for a group of people. Although, by the way, in South America, they actually don't use vosotros anymore. They use ustedes for both informal and formal forms of address for a group of people. But anyway, whilst with in this appointment with this civil servant, I accidentally used the du form. Now, this civil servant was quite a sort of traditional civil servant. She was what they call an Amtfrau, and obviously probably been working there for years. And she didn't like that. She asked me to use sie. But it got me thinking, because this polite form of address, it just doesn't come easily to me as a native English speaker, because we don't have it in English. We just use you, which is the form of address for a singular person and for a group of people, and for both formal and informal settings. However, we did actually used to have two separate forms of address in English. So you may have seen when you read a Shakespearean text, or if you've read religious texts in English, you might have seen the noun the pronoun thou, and the possessives thy and thine. And it's these that used to be the informal form of address to a singular person in English. And so much like the tu in French, du in Spanish, and du in German. And yeah, it was the form of address used for friends, family, or for addressing someone of a lower social standing. Thou actually dates back to Old English, which was spoken between the 400s and the 1100s, and also was used in Middle English, which was spoken between the 1100s and the 1500s. And you was used for addressing groups of people, or the polite form for addressing people of a higher social status, like the French vous. However, by the 1400s, and with the evolution of social norms, thou was seen as less respectful, and so it fell out of usage. And you became the universal term, which makes English, I guess, more egalitarian in a way. So these days, you'll only find thee, thou, and thine, as I said, in Shakespearean texts or in religious texts, but also it is actually still used in some parts of England, in some parts of Northern England. But it is now just you, which is used in both formal and informal settings as a form of address for both a singular person and groups of people. But I'm curious, if English is not your first language, do you find having only one form of address for you easier? And does that make learning English easier in general? Or perhaps you prefer having two separate forms of address for formal and informal situations. Also, for any other language that I haven't mentioned, please do let me know how forms of address work. I'd be very interested to know. So please do let me know in the comments.